Now, for more on this topic, we're joined by Perry Wong, Managing Director of Research at the Milken Institute. Welcome to the show, Perry.
Thank you for having me.
So as we heard there, it's the first time since the adoption of the euro that a currency has been added to the SDR basket. Now, after rejecting China's request for inclusion in 2010, what factors made this the right time for the IMF to include the RMB?
I guess it's a long list of factors. I think, first of all, I think the economy, the Chinese economy, has increasingly influencing to the global economic setting. And if you look at the economic contribution, growth contribution of the Chinese economy, it has increased to around 40%. So that's a very heavy weight. And I think if you look back in 2015, look at the statistics, the Chinese exports weighed in about 13% of the global trade. So in that sense, by including the Chinese currency into the basket is only the logical choice.
Now, Perry, some analysts argue that the SDR is more about the prestige, while others think it can really boost a country's economic growth and improve global financial stability. What do you think the significance is?
I think it's very significant. I think as we heard from Lagarde, it is the first time, after all, for a long while that the fund added one currency to the basket. But I think with the inclusion of Chinese currency, it is significant because China is, by a large count, an emerging economy, not quite like the other four. So in that sense, it's a very strong statement on the importance of the growth contribution from the emerging markets, and certainly not just China alone. Secondly, I think it is a recognition, and I think it is a little bit beyond the prestigious value, is that the commitment that the Chinese government has demonstrated both in internationalize their currency, by liberalize their financial markets domestically. So that really make the Chinese capital market, I think for the first time in the last 20, 30 years, that operable by the foreign investors. So in that sense, the timing is quite right. And I think also there are practical terms for other central banks and large financial institutions to hold the Chinese currency as their reserve.
Now, Perry, given China's reforms and now its inclusion in the SDR, what impact do you think this is going to have on China's economy in the long term?
I don't think it's going to be that direct, I think, unfortunately, because in one way or the many, that I think the inclusion would make the global capital market flow better, and also the financial stability and liquidity, I think, would be enhanced. But in terms of how that transform them into growth, economic growth, particularly in China, I think the Chinese real sector has to perform better in that sense. I think let's not jump too quickly into by having this event happen, then that would beef up the economic growth in China.
Okay, so let's also look at the currency exchange reforms. What do you think this means for China as it really tries to bolster the yuan's international usage?
I think that is a step forward for the Chinese management scheme in terms of exchange rate. By inclusion, I think the Chinese government or the Chinese central bank really have to manage their foreign reserve in a more transparent, in a more predictable manner or style. It's not to say that the Chinese government is not being transparent, but I think when the market is expecting and watching, because the currency in the basket, and the government has to be more transparent, and I think do a better job in messaging.
Now, in terms of the companies and investors who will be stepping up perhaps their use of the yuan, which sectors do you think have the most to gain by having the RMB included in the SDR basket?
Definitely the financial market, the foreign exchange market perhaps would have some celebration to make because the capital flow may be enhanced. There will be more fund going into China. Now, having that said, I think there are still work to be done in the Chinese capital markets. I think particularly if the demand for the Chinese asset to increase because of the inclusion, the Chinese equity markets and debt market has to create more liquidity, more flow, more depth for the foreign capital to go in, which I see that if everything is right, I think that market would be quite active.
Definitely something people will be watching for. We'll have to leave it there. Perry Wong joining us from the Milken Institute.